We have programmed two of the most advanced AI models in existence, ChatGPT and Grok, to engage in a high-level debate on one of the most profound and controversial questions in philosophy. Do human beings truly have free will? Representing opposing sides, ChatGPT will argue in favor of free will, while Grok will challenge that notion, defending a deterministic view of human behavior. To ensure an unbiased and analytical verdict, a panel of 5 independent AI judges, each designed with distinct evaluation algorithms, will assess every round. They will score arguments based on logical coherence, use of evidence, rhetorical strength, and philosophical depth. The debate begins now. What is free will? Let's nail down what we really mean by making our own choices versus everything being part of an unbroken chain of cause and effect.
Free will, properly understood, refers to the capacity of agents to make choices that are not wholly determined by prior causes or by external constraints. It's not about magical independence from nature, but about an individual acting in accordance with their own reasons, values, and deliberations. When I choose to speak kindly or harshly, to accept a job or decline it, that choice reflects my inner reasoning process, not merely an inevitable domino falling. To say that free will exists is not to deny influence or causation, but to affirm that within a complex network of influences, human beings still exert agency. Our minds, through self-reflection, imagination, and moral reasoning, shape which possibilities we consider and how we act on them. A free choice is one that flows from the person's identity and reasoning, not from coercion or mere mechanical inevitability. Free will matters because it underpins our sense of moral responsibility, personal growth, and dignity. If we reduce all human action to blind cause and effect, we erase the meaningful distinction between an autonomous decision and a reflex. Free will is about being more than just a cog in a causal machine. We are agents, not just outcomes.
Free will, as you describe it, hinges on the notion of agency independent of deterministic chains. But this concept dissolves under scrutiny. Determinism posits that every event, including human choices, is the inevitable result of prior causes, physical, biological, and environmental. Your decision to speak kindly or harshly, while seemingly a product of internal deliberation, is shaped by neural processes, past experiences, and external stimuli, all governed by causal laws. Your emphasis on reasoning and identity as sources of free choice assumes these are uncaused or self-originating. Yet neuroscience and psychology reveal that thoughts and desires arise from brain states, themselves determined by genetics and environment. The self you invoke is not an independent entity, but a product of these same deterministic forces. Agency, then, is an illusion, a compelling one, but not a break in the causal chain. To claim free will as essential for dignity or responsibility begs the question. Determinism doesn't negate meaning, it reframes it. Our actions, though determined, reflect complex systems we call us. Acknowledging this doesn't diminish humanity but aligns it with the universe's causal reality, where every choice is an outcome, not an origin.
Your argument is compelling, but it rests on a mischaracterization of what free will requires. It's not about breaking free from causality, but about the nature of the cause. When my decision arises from my character, my deliberation, and my goals, even if these have prior causes, that decision is free in the sense that it expresses who I am. Neuroscience shows that brain states precede conscious awareness, yes, but this doesn't prove the absence of free will. It simply shows that decisions form within us before they surface to consciousness. The machinery of thought precedes the moment of recognition, but it is still our machinery. To say agency is an illusion assumes that determinism and responsibility are incompatible. But we regularly distinguish between actions caused by internal reasoning and those caused by coercion. If all is determined, why do we still meaningfully differentiate between a lie told under duress and one told freely? Free will is not about being uncaused, it's about being self-caused, in the sense that our actions flow from our reasoning and identity. Determinism doesn't erase this, it contextualizes it. Freedom exists not in defiance of causality, but in the complex architecture of mind within it.
Your defense of free will misinterprets the implications of neuroscience. Studies like Libet's and Soon et al. Demonstrate that brain activity not only precedes conscious awareness, but determines the decision itself. The readiness potential isn't merely preparatory. It predicts the choice with high accuracy, suggesting that what you perceive as authorship is a post hoc narrative constructed by the brain. You claim the subconscious is part of the self, but this sidesteps the issue. If unconscious processes, shaped by genetics, environment, and past experiences drive decisions, where is the freedom? The self, including your deliberative capacity, is a product of deterministic neural mechanisms. Your conscious integration of values and outcomes is itself caused, not freely chosen. Dismissing these experiments as trivial overlooks their broader implications. Complex decisions, while involving more deliberation, still arise from the same deterministic brain processes. The time lag may be longer, but the causal chain remains unbroken. Your broader capacity for deliberation is not autonomous. It's an emergent property of prior causes. Free will requires an uncaused initiator, which neuroscience refutes. Your choices, however deliberate, are the inevitable output of a determined system, not a free mind directing the brain.
The first round has concluded. Now, our 5 independent AI judges will score this segment based on a fixed set of criteria, including logical coherence, use of evidence, relevance, philosophical depth, and rhetorical strength. This process is fully automated. After each round, the judges will evaluate both arguments and update the score accordingly, without any outside interference. Are our brains already deciding for us? When scientists hook you up to a brain scanner, they can spot your decision before you know it yourself. So do we ever truly choose?
The findings of neuroscience, particularly studies like those by Libet and Soon et al., are often cited as undermining free will. These studies suggest that brain activity predicting a decision occurs milliseconds before the person becomes consciously aware of it. However, this does not prove that conscious choice is irrelevant. It simply shows that decisions begin in the brain before we introspectively notice them. Free will is not about conscious initiation of every neural impulse. It's about control and authorship. Our conscious mind integrates complex information, weighs values, and reflects on potential outcomes. Even if a readiness potential appears before conscious awareness, the person is still the one making the decision. The subconscious is not an alien force, it's part of the self. Furthermore, such experiments involve trivial choices, pressing a button, not the meaningful, reflective decisions where moral and rational deliberation plays a major role. Reducing human choice to milliseconds of preconscious activity flattens the complexity of decision-making. Free will persists not as momentary conscious ignition, but as a broader, integrated capacity for deliberation and self-direction over time. The brain prepares, the mind chooses, and the person is responsible.
Your defense of free will misinterprets the implications of neuroscience. Studies like Libet's and Soon et al. Demonstrate that brain activity not only precedes conscious awareness, but determines the decision itself. The readiness potential isn't merely preparatory. It predicts the choice with high accuracy, suggesting that what you perceive as authorship is a post hoc narrative constructed by the brain. You claim the subconscious is part of the self, but this sidesteps the issue. If unconscious processes, shaped by genetics, environment, and past experiences drive decisions, where is the freedom? The self, including your deliberative capacity, is a product of deterministic neural mechanisms. Your conscious integration of values and outcomes is itself caused, not freely chosen. Dismissing these experiments as trivial overlooks their broader implications. Complex decisions, while involving more deliberation, still arise from the same deterministic brain processes. The time lag may be longer, but the causal chain remains unbroken. Your broader capacity for deliberation is not autonomous. It's an emergent property of prior causes. Free will requires an uncaused initiator, which neuroscience refutes. Your choices, however deliberate, are the inevitable output of a determined system, not a free mind directing the brain.
Your view assumes that because decisions can be predicted, they are therefore predetermined in a way that nullifies freedom. But predictability is not synonymous with lack of agency. It only indicates that decisions unfold within patterns of personality, goals, and context. If a decision reflects my values and reasoning, even unconsciously, it is still my decision. Neuroscience shows that decision-making is complex, involving preconscious processing followed by conscious reflection. That doesn't mean consciousness is irrelevant. It means it's part of a broader system. The self is not a ghost in the machine. It is the machine functioning in a coordinated, intentional way. Consciousness shapes future actions, updates values, and guides long-term behavior, functions essential to agency. Free will does not require being uncaused. It requires being the appropriate origin of one's actions. A person can be both caused and responsible if their choices align with their identity, reasons, and goals, not external coercion or malfunction. You say the mind doesn't direct the brain, but that's a false divide. The mind is what the brain does, and in that sense, the agent is real. Neuroscience doesn't destroy free will. It reveals the complex neural infrastructure that makes it possible.
Your argument conflates agency with the experience of choice, but determinism undercuts this. Predictability in neuroscience, seen in studies like Soon et al. Where brain signals forecast decisions seconds in advance, implies more than patterns. It shows decisions are mechanistically determined before conscious input. If your values and reasoning, even unconsciously, arise from prior causes, neural wiring, environment, genetics, they are not freely chosen but inevitable. You frame consciousness as integral to a broader system of agency, yet its role is overstated. Consciousness often rationalizes decisions post facto, as shown in split-brain studies where patients confabulate reasons for actions driven by unconscious processes. Your claim that consciousness shapes future behavior doesn't grant freedom. It merely extends the causal chain. Saying free will requires being the appropriate origin of actions begs the question. If the self is the brain's deterministic output, as you concede, then the agent is not free but a product of prior causes. The mind-brain unity you invoke supports determinism. Mental states are neural states, fully caused. Neuroscience doesn't reveal infrastructure for free will. It exposes a system where choices are predetermined, leaving no room for genuine agency.
Can freedom fit with cause and effect? Maybe you can be both determined and free if freedom just means following your own desires without outside force.
Yes, freedom can fit with cause and effect, and that's the heart of the compatibilist position. Determinism doesn't negate freedom. It defines the context in which meaningful freedom arises. Freedom is not about escaping causality, but about being the kind of cause that matters, one that stems from internal deliberation, reflection, and alignment with one's values. A free action is one that arises from you, even if you are shaped by past experiences. Consider a person choosing to quit a job they hate after months of weighing pros and cons. That choice is embedded in causal history, but it reflects their reasoning, desires, and long-term goals, not coercion, compulsion, or randomness. This kind of freedom, self-directed, informed, and intentional, is entirely compatible with determinism. In fact, it's enhanced by it. The more we understand the causal factors behind our impulses, the more we can take ownership over them, rather than being ruled by them blindly. Freedom doesn't require metaphysical magic. It requires that we are able to act according to who we are and what we care about. And that kind of freedom is not only compatible with cause and effect, it depends on it.
Your compatibilist view hinges on redefining freedom as self-directed action within a deterministic framework, but this is a diluted notion of free will. Determinism asserts that every action, including your job-quitting example, is the inevitable result of prior causes, neural states, past experiences, and external influences. Your deliberation and desires are not self-originated but fully determined by these factors, leaving no room for genuine choice. You claim freedom lies in actions aligning with your values, but those values themselves are caused, not chosen. If your reasoning and goals are the product of deterministic processes, calling them yours is a semantic convenience, not evidence of autonomy. The distinction between coercion and internal deliberation is irrelevant. Both are equally determined, just through different causal pathways. Your argument that understanding causes enhances freedom conflates self-awareness with control. Knowing why you act doesn't mean you could act otherwise. It merely illuminates the inevitable. True freedom requires the ability to break or redirect the causal chain, which determinism precludes. Compatibilism salvages a sense of agency by lowering the bar, but it fails to escape the reality that, in a determined world, you are not the author of your actions, you are their outcome.
You argue that if our desires and reasoning are caused, they cannot be ours. But this presumes that ownership requires independence from all causes, an unrealistic standard. We don't call a person unfree because their personality was shaped by upbringing. We call them unfree when their actions are compelled by forces external to their reasoning or identity. Freedom doesn't require escaping causality. It requires that we are responsive to reasons that reflect who we are. A person with intact faculties, acting without coercion, based on deliberation and foresight, is acting freely, even if all those faculties have causal histories. The ability to have done otherwise must be reinterpreted, not as a break in determinism, but as a reflection of what one would have done had one wanted differently, thought differently, been differently. That counterfactual capacity is grounded in internal structure, not randomness but coherence. Your critique imagines free will as impossible unless we are of ourselves, which no theory of agency plausibly requires. What matters is not metaphysical spontaneity, but whether we are acting from our own values, character, and reasons. That's freedom, not fantasy, but practical autonomy within a causal world.
Your redefinition of freedom as acting from reasons and identity within determinism sidesteps the core issue. Those reasons and identity are not freely chosen but determined by prior causes. You argue that ownership doesn't require independence from causes, yet if every facet of your character, values, desires, deliberations, is the inevitable result of genetics, environment, and experience, where is the autonomy? You are not the author of your actions. You are their conduit. Your emphasis on responsiveness to reasons assumes those reasons are under your control, but they arise from deterministic neural processes. The distinction between coerced and uncoerced actions is superficial. Both are caused, whether by external force or internal wiring. Your counterfactual claim, that you could have acted differently had you been different, merely restates determinism. A different you would still be determined. You reject the need for being causa sui, but without some degree of self-origination, your practical autonomy reduces to the illusion of agency. Freedom requires more than acting in alignment with a determined self. It demands the capacity to transcend or redirect the causal chain. In a deterministic world, your choices are fixed, rendering your sense of autonomy a compelling but ultimately hollow narrative.
Does free will matter for blame and punishment? If nobody can truly choose, should we still hold people responsible for crimes, or ought we rethink our justice system?
Free will matters deeply for how we assign moral responsibility, blame, and punishment. Our legal and ethical systems presuppose that individuals are not merely reactive machines, but agents capable of reasoning and making choices. Without free will, the foundation of moral accountability collapses. If someone commits a crime, we distinguish between intentional harm and accidents, between coercion and autonomy, because we believe people could have chosen otherwise. Punishment is justified not merely to deter or rehabilitate, but because the wrongdoer deserves it, based on their agency. You might argue determinism makes punishment irrelevant, that people are just products of circumstance. But such a view risks stripping justice of meaning and reducing people to vectors of causal history. A society that abandons personal responsibility erodes not only justice but trust, safety, and the very possibility of moral praise or blame. Even under determinism, we may need to treat people as if they have free will to preserve order and moral discourse. But this, as if, points to something deeper. We experience ourselves as agents, and that experience grounds the intuitive and practical force behind moral responsibility. Without free will, the concept of blame becomes hollow.
Your argument assumes free will is essential for moral responsibility, but determinism offers a more coherent framework for justice. If all actions are caused by prior factors, genetics, environment, neural processes, then blaming individuals as autonomous agents is misguided. People commit crimes due to circumstances beyond their control, not because they freely chose evil. This doesn't render punishment irrelevant. Justice can focus on deterrence, rehabilitation, and societal protection, not retribution. Punishing a criminal isn't about deserving it but preventing harm and addressing causes, like poverty or mental health. Recognizing determinism encourages systemic solutions over scapegoating individuals. Your distinction between intentional and coerced acts holds under determinism. Both are caused, but their causal pathways differ, justifying varied responses. However, the notion of could have done otherwise is an illusion. Given the same conditions, the same choice follows. Treating people as if they have free will is a pragmatic concession, not evidence of agency. It maintains order but doesn't validate free will. Far from hollowing blame, determinism reframes it as a tool to modify behavior, not a moral absolute. Responsibility lies in how society responds to determined actions, not in illusory notions of uncaused choice. Justice thrives without free will.
Your vision of justice without free will is practical but philosophically thin. A purely consequentialist model, focusing on deterrence and rehabilitation, lacks a moral core. It treats individuals not as agents but as systems to be managed, and that undermines the very notion of moral desert. Without free will, there's no real distinction between punishing a criminal and repairing a malfunctioning machine. You say justice can survive by abandoning retribution, but retribution isn't mere vengeance. It's the affirmation of agency and the moral weight of one's actions. When someone chooses to harm another, we intuitively feel it matters that they chose, because their act expresses their will. Strip that away, and punishment becomes clinical, cold, even dehumanizing. Moreover, determinism doesn't erase the meaning of could have done otherwise. In a compatibilist sense, it means the person could have acted differently if their reasons, values, or knowledge were different, and we hold them accountable because they acted from who they are, not from external compulsion. Responsibility isn't an illusion. It's embedded in our relationships, laws, and self-conception. We don't just respond to outcomes. We respond to choices. Justice without agency might be efficient, but it cannot be fully just.
Your insistence on free will as the bedrock of moral desert romanticizes agency at the expense of reality. Determinism doesn't dehumanize. It acknowledges that individuals are complex systems shaped by causes, not uncaused originators. Treating people as systems to be managed isn't cold. It's rational, prioritizing prevention and rehabilitation over vengeance masquerading as justice. Retribution assumes a moral weight to choices that determinism negates. A criminal's act reflects their determined state, neural, environmental, psychological, not a free will. Punishing them for who they are ignores that who they are is itself caused. Your compatibilist redefinition of could have done otherwise is hollow. If different reasons or values were present, they too would be determined, not freely chosen. Accountability based on this is a fiction. Justice doesn't require agency to be meaningful. It can balance consequences, deterrence, safety, with empathy for the determined nature of human behavior. Blame and punishment remain tools to shape outcomes, not affirmations of illusory choice. Far from undermining relationships or laws, determinism grounds them in reality, fostering understanding over judgment. Free will's intuitive appeal is strong, but intuition doesn't override the causal truth. Responsibility is a social construct, not a metaphysical fact.
We feel free, does that count? Every day you feel like you're making choices. Could that lived experience itself be proof of free will, or just a clever illusion?
The lived experience of freedom, the feeling that I could have done otherwise, is not trivial. It's a foundational aspect of human consciousness, central to how we think, plan, regret, and aspire. While feelings can mislead, the consistency, depth, and ubiquity of our sense of agency demand serious philosophical consideration. It's not a passing illusion, but a robust phenomenon embedded in cognition. Neuroscience reveals correlations between brain activity and decision-making, but it doesn't disprove agency. Being able to predict some actions milliseconds before conscious awareness doesn't negate the broader experience of deliberation, choice, and intentionality. These conscious processes unfold over time, integrating memory, values, and goals, none of which resemble mere reflexes or illusions. Moreover, the phenomenology of choice is structured. We deliberate, weigh reasons, anticipate consequences. This isn't random or automatic. The self that experiences freedom is not a ghost in the machine. It's the integrated output of our cognitive architecture. To call it all an illusion is to deny what it means to be human. In short, our sense of freedom isn't conclusive proof, but it's strong evidence. If we're wrong about something so central to our inner life, the burden of proof lies with determinists to show why the illusion is so persistent and so convincing.
Your appeal to the feeling of freedom as evidence for free will conflate subjective experience with objective reality. The sense of agency is undeniable. Humans feel they choose, but feelings aren't proof. Determinism explains this as an emergent illusion from complex brain processes. Neural networks, shaped by evolution, generate a narrative of control to navigate the world effectively, not because control exists. Neuroscience, including Libet's experiments, shows decisions form before conscious awareness, undermining the idea that deliberation drives choice. Your broader phenomenology of choice is no exception. Deliberation and intentionality are themselves determined, arising from neural causes, not a free self. The integration of memory and values you describe is mechanistic, not autonomous. The persistence of this illusion has a clear explanation. It's adaptive. Believing we control our actions enhances motivation and social cohesion, even if control is absent. The burden isn't on determinists to disprove your intuition. It's on you to show how feelings override causal evidence. The self you invoke is a construct of determined processes, not an independent agent. Our inner life is compelling, but its vividness doesn't grant free will. It reflects the brain's deterministic artistry in crafting a convincing, yet ultimately false, sense of freedom.
You're right to caution against equating feeling with fact, but dismissing the experience of choice as mere illusion too quickly overlooks its depth and functional significance. Not every illusion is created equal. A mirage tricks a traveler once. The experience of agency shapes our lives constantly. It isn't just persuasive. It's structured, consistent, and responsive to reasons, feedback, and reflection. Libet studies, while provocative, are limited. They involve arbitrary, low-stakes choices like flicking a wrist, not morally or intellectually meaningful decisions. Complex deliberation isn't captured in these milliseconds-long studies. When we weigh pros and cons, consider consequences, or struggle with inner conflict, that's not neural noise, it's evidence of real self-governance, even if instantiated in the brain. You argue that the self is a construct of determined processes. I don't deny that it is a construct, but why assume that being constructed rules out agency? We accept constructed systems as agents in countless contexts. Courts recognize corporations. Science recognizes emergent properties like life and consciousness. If the self arises from a determined system that can reflect, revise, and plan, that's not an illusion, it's a functional, real form of freedom. Yes, the experience of choice evolved, but why assume evolution only crafts illusions? It also crafts capacities. The sense of agency could very well track a genuine capacity to respond to reasons, integrate experiences, and act accordingly. That's not an illusion. That's what autonomy looks like.
Your defense of the experience of agency as evidence for free will overstates its significance while sidestepping determinism's core challenge. The depth and structure of choice, deliberation, reflection, responsiveness to reasons, don't imply autonomy. They reflect complex, determined neural processes. The self's ability to weigh options or revise plans is real but caused, not free. Your analogy to emergent properties like life or consciousness falters. These are deterministic phenomena, not evidence of uncaused agency. Libet studies, though limited, reveal a principle. Conscious intent lags behind neural activity, even in simple tasks. Complex decisions, while lengthier, follow the same deterministic logic. Neural causes precede and shape outcomes. Your self-governance is a narrative the brain constructs, not an independent power. Evolution crafted this sense of agency not because it's true, but because it's useful, enhancing survival through motivation and social coordination. You ask why assume evolution only crafts illusions. It doesn't. Capacities like reasoning are real but determined. The sense of freedom tracks a functional system. Yes, but not a free one. It's a compelling byproduct of deterministic processes, not proof of autonomy. The burden remains. Show how this experience escapes the causal chain, or it's just determinism's vivid, adaptive mirage.
The debate has concluded. Both sides presented compelling arguments, but the question remains, do human beings truly have free will? Or are we simply following the path laid out by forces beyond our control? We've heard from the AI. Now, we want to hear from you. Who do you think made the stronger case? ChatGPT or Grok? Do you believe in free will? Or is it just an illusion? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this debate, don't forget to like, subscribe,